All right, should be starting up soon. Looks like we're live, so we'll get things rolling. Thank you everyone for joining today's episode of the OpenJS Foundation Cross Project Council meeting. Today is December 3rd of 2019. And we've got a fairly full agenda. I don't know if we have any things we want to discuss in the private session. Should we save 10 minutes to see if there's anything to share there, or do you think we're good?
I guess for the champion, do we have the champions from the current applications, or know if there's anything that we need to discuss?
Yeah, I guess if if nobody's raising anything now, then we'll just skip the private session and try to work through this long list of issues we have here. If anybody thinks of something as we go, just speak up and we'll carve out some time. So I tried to jump in here and sort the agenda a little bit before the meeting, but didn't get to spend as much time as I had liked. Disrupted by a call, but I got, so the first agenda item in the Google Doc, working from there is the add missing links for bylaws and vision statements. That was merged, so we can move along past that one. The next one I wanted to touch on real quickly is the Collab Summit sessions. I just wanted to mention that I think that there's the schedules shuffling around, but in the previous iteration, I did have a chunk of time for us to get together and work on things. I started a Google document and added a link to it in that GitHub issue. So if anyone wants to kind of flesh any of that out, feel free to jump in there and add some ideas for different areas that we can work on, or dig deeper into the specific areas we've already got mapped out. So next on the agenda is add foundation-wide copyright guidance. Brian created this a week ago. There's been some commentary. Does anybody want to provide any context on this? I see, Michael, you had a couple of notes here.
Yeah, I mean, really, I think it just needs more comments and approvals to get it landed. I think it's copying, it's putting in what was approved by the board, I believe, somewhere where it's more visible. So I think it should mostly be about, like, if there's somewhere different where it should go, or I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, it's just it's been open for 7 days, not a lot of comments or reviews, so we should get more people looking at it so that it can land.
Okay.
I think also, just some of the more practical things we can add in here if there's for projects, like how they're actually expected to implement this, which I think is fairly straightforward, but still it's new for many folks. So if folks have questions about that, please pop that into this PR as well, so we can get that answered too.
Okay. Great, thank you. All right, so we will move along. The next item is add a copy of the contributor covenant COC text. And this is kind of born out of the previous COC work that we're still working through, is kind of held up for this one. This adds the contributor covenant directly into the COC document in our CPC repo. And there's some conversation here about whether we should link to a commit SHA or have the copy directly in the file. And I did approve this, but I am, with further thought, thinking that it makes sense to link to the SHA. But I'll open it up for discussion here for how to move forward.
I was actually just having the same thought, Joe. I just went through and reviewed it and approved it, and then I was like, oh yeah, actually linking to the SHA might be better.
I had the same thing.
Is that though, I mean, what is our instruction currently to our own projects on this? If I remember right, it is to inline the COC text.
I don't think so. I think it was to reference the one that we have and add in. I could be wrong, but I think it was like to reference the one in the CPC repo and provide the links to the reporting infrastructure, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I believe that's right. And if it's not, we should review that because yeah, I don't think we want to have everyone inlining the text.
Yeah, agreed. That would be a spaghetti of updates.
Yeah.
And in particular, like you don't get the translations, you don't get the benefit. Like, well, that's one of the key things is you don't get the translations, and then you have to worry about maintenance, keeping it in sync, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
My
sure.
only concern was this: is my understanding is the code of conduct is designed to be copied in your own repository and have your reporting email address inserted in there. So that feels a bit weird to point just to like the text, where in the text you don't have like insert email address in there.
Yeah, although I think it is written that way, but I don't feel terribly bad with what we have in the CPC repo, which does exactly that.
I would be happy to amend the PR effectively to do that, especially if it is the instruction that we were also given to our projects regarding the COC. When I went through the onboarding, I recall that at least at that point, the starting instruction was technically at least to inline the COC in the project repos themselves. But if that's been amended, then that's great, and I've just missed that part of the onboarding. Another question then arises: what is the proper version to be linking to, and or should we be tracking the progress of the COC effectively as it's now gone from 1.4 to 2.0? And for example, the translation links are quite likely to get updated to point to that instead.
Yep, I would say we should be. So basically, if every time we're aware of a new version, like there should be a PR that says, let's move up to the latest COC, and if it's approved by the CPC, then that's what we do. Is there like, does that make sense, or is there some reason why we wouldn't want to update to the latest? Or
That makes sense to me.
Let's try that. I'll add a PR for amending the COC version to 2.0. Then we can discuss there to see what we're going to do about it, and if there are any issues that come up specifically about it, and what are the changes.
Sounds good. Now the PR will have to be against the proposal. Like right now we have a PR to move this to stage 3, which is the final stage to put it in place. Once it'll be easier, I think, once it's actually in place for the first time. But so I think PR'd against the, I don't know, like we have a PR open to move it to stage 3. Do we want another PR against stage 2 first and then rebase the stage 3 one? Not sure which makes the most sense.
We're using Git. Git can figure all this out for us. We don't need to think about this.
Well, you need to make a PR against something though, right?
Yes, but we can trust Git to figure out the changes and merge them.
Okay, well, if you want, if you want to just create a PR and we'll go from there.
Sounds good to me. Thank you, Emily.
Can I just ask a quick question here? Sorry, like from the perspective of a project, the project will point to sort of a single place inside of the CPC where the actual SHA to the contributor covenant will be? Is that like how this is going to be organized?
If you
Yes.
look, Yeah, if
Thank
you look at the link I just pasted, that shows what we have in the CPC one.
Okay,
So
yeah,
I
sorry,
think,
I'm on my phone, so I missed that.
okay.
I apologize.
But
No worries.
anyway, the answer was, you got the answer. So
Great.
I think we have the next step on that one.
Okay, great. The next agenda item, and if I was able to work through the agenda a little further, I probably would have pushed this till later. But do we want to discuss the OpenJS Foundation project landscape? I know we had a long discussion last week in the meeting. I would say maybe we save this for last and come back to it, or encourage folks on the call to take a look at that issue and add your comments there.
Yeah, I think pushing it to the end at least makes sense. I think Brian, since he couldn't make it today, was thinking we could sort of defer to the next time to talk about it.
Okay, I actually just pulled it out of the agenda and put it at the bottom. But in general, I encourage folks to take a look at the issue, whether we get to it or not, and we can add more comments there. Great. And Michael, I think you're adding meeting notes to the copyright issue instead of the covenant.
Yeah, okay, good point. Thanks.
FYI. No worries. The next issue in the agenda is GitHub admin issue number 409. So we discussed this last time. Voting and regular members should be org owners. I think there was additional conversation around two-factor authentication. Are there action items out of this that we should document and or pull the agenda?
So there was one action item, and it's on my to-do list to circle back with some folks who do not have two-factor auth enabled, and just give them a heads up that they should enable that, or we're going to remove them until such time that they do enable that, and it's a very small number of people that affects. So that is that's one point that's on me.
Okay, great. Would you mind dropping a comment in the issue? Just
yeah, totally.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think we did agree that all CPC members would be org owners, which when I tried to add somebody last week as a new regular member, I noticed isn't the case. So we still need somebody to do that.
So so you need all CPC members to be org owners?
Yeah, I think that's what I remember we agreed last week.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed that there shouldn't be much distinction between voting and regular members. What was the blocker that you're referring to, Michael? Was there something in documentation or just that? No,
it just, somebody needs to go through, somebody who is an org owner needs to make the other people org owners. Okay, great. So yeah, I was trying to add Waleed as a new regular member, but you need to be an owner to do that. And okay. All right, great. So we have some action items there. We can move on, unless anyone has anything more to discuss there. The next issue is pull request number 405. This is AD's proposal for charter submission and review per issue number 200. And Jory opened this 20 days ago. Mateo's got a couple of comments. I think, Michael, you had asked for some alignment with the charter review bit of it. And then we also already have a project charter submitted. Is that what this is for the AMP project? Oh, they have an issue open in their repo referencing this issue.
So Jory, this is your PR. Do we know where what we need here to move this forward?
So I do recall that I had these changes to add in. Apologies for not having that done before this meeting, but I'll get that taken care of this afternoon.
Great. All right, thank you. Okay. Great. So moving on. The next issue is point of contact for onboarding. Opening up this issue 400. Toby opened this up a little while ago. I think, I feel like we discussed this, but I'm not sure where exactly we landed.
Point of contact for onboarding. So we discussed on this one, Joe, that verbally that there was an awareness that the champion is intended to stay with the project through incubation, but that this is not clear in our documentation. So we need to revise that to make it more clear that the champion remains with the project as their point of contact.
Okay. So I'll drop in a note. Champion remains point of contact through incubation. Documentation needs to be updated to make that clear. Great. All right, so that's a great contribution. If anybody wants to take that up, that shouldn't be too difficult. And if not, I'll try to look at it at some point in the future.
I can take that on.
Oh, great.
Who was that who was speaking?
Other Mike.
Okay.
Thanks, Mike. Excellent. Much appreciated. Next agenda item is onboarding meta questions. I know we talked about this as well. Jory opened it up about a month ago. Looking at Michael's last comment was from 26 days ago. So, yeah, there are two questions here. Should all issues related to onboarding be moved to the onboarding repo, which I think we've decided that should be the case. It should be the canonical spot. Question two, looking at required files such as code of conduct, do we require uniformity in naming? I think we agreed that we should do the GitHub preference in naming and require that. Does anybody have any more context here?
Let me see if I can recall this one.
Yeah, I'm sorry. This is also not really fresh in my memory.
We did decide to do the uniformity of naming. We also discussed a little bit more where certain issues should live. The preference here was that onboarding questions really go solely to the onboarding repository, but the point was raised that the onboarding checklist canonically lives in this repository. So there's a bit of a kind of problem there where we've kind of separated things that should ideally be kept together. And I'm not sure what the result of that decision was.
I think my recollection is we agreed that they would all move into the we would try and move everything to the onboarding repo because we thought that would be the best experience for those people being onboarded.
Yeah, I remember that as well.
So specifics, we may come across specific ones that are harder or easier, but it seemed like that was the agreement. And so Like, unless there's a problem moving that stuff over, maybe we should look at what it would take to move it over. Just take somebody to actually look at it and figure out what does or doesn't make sense.
So do we, I'm capturing this in a comment in the issue that question 1, onboarding repos place for all onboarding issues and documentation. Exceptions may arise, but should be dealt with as they come. Question 2, we should follow GitHub naming conventions. I think one question born out of that is, should we document that somewhere, and if so, where?
And is the GitHub naming conventions to, like, for which documents?
Like code of conduct and you know, I don't know if governance is another one.
Yeah, I guess that's like, is it, are we saying that, like, in general, we'll just follow GitHub naming conventions, in what case that can be documented somewhere in the CPC governance, or if it's like specifically the code of conduct should be called this because that's what GitHub uses or supports, then we should update, I think, the code of conduct governance to say that somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I think code of conduct is one that's specific because they, you know, use that in terms of highlighting like projects that are friendly to new contributors and things like that. I'm trying to find where GitHub documents this sort of stuff. But do we think it's safe to just sort of, you know, does it need to be explicitly written out that we, as the CPC and OpenJS Foundation, advise projects to name their files accordingly, or do we just kind of let that one ride?
I'll take the action, like, specifically in the context of the code of conduct proposal to make sure that it says this is what the file will be named, and that lines up with what GitHub is looking for.
Okay. Okay, I just added a comment just to update that there. All right, great. So that makes sense. Thanks, Michael. Looking at the agenda, the next one is the move COC proposal to stage 3, which is, I believe, just waiting on issue number 413 or pull request 413. So we can skip over that unless anyone has anything. Next up is the responsible security disclosures. Michael, is there any update on that?
Yeah, I was looking at that just the other day to see if I could. Yeah, so there's a few comments that Marcin has to update in the package maintenance repo where we're working on the sort of baseline thing. And he says he's going to make the updates tomorrow or Wednesday, and then we'll try and get some more reviews and get that landed. That's going to be the basis, like that's the general recommendation to the community. And then from that, we'll build the one that we would recommend specifically for the OpenJS Foundation. So still in progress, but does look like there's some progress.
Great, great. Yeah, I'm looking at that issue. I posted it into the chat if anyone's curious about the package maintenance work on this that we will use to further this. Thanks, Michael, for helping push that forward. Great. So next up is the post-bootstrap project board. Do we want to jump into that or jump over to the project onboarding issues or talk about the project landscape? Does anyone have any preference? I would say we jump to the onboarding issues.
Yep, I would agree.
Okay, great. So the first one is in the project onboarding repo is issue 31, communication channel between CPC and AMP infrastructure working group. This was opened up 3 weeks ago. There's been a few comments, but largely right out of the gates. But it looks like Brian is going to spin up a mailing list. Where is this? So I think Toby was looking for some guidance on where they would need to land coming out of incubation. Is that right? One of the graduation requirements for AMP from the CPC was to draft a clear plan to disentangle the CDN from the AMP runtime from the Google AMP cache. They're tracking that in a working group infrastructure issue. There are multiple options and open questions. It's important to establish communication channel between the CPC and the AMP and for working group so that there's an upfront consensus as to solutions the CPC will find acceptable. Just tagging people on GitHub issue doesn't seem sufficient. So I think that we were looking at creating a mailing list to help track that. Also, a Slack group would be good as well. So I don't think Brian's on, so I can't ask him if he's gotten any progress there, but we can also discuss this further in Montreal as well.
I'm not sure that he has, but I did want to take a second and thank Chris and Tierney. I know we're interested in doing this, but also ask if anybody else is interested in being part of that conversation. We could certainly use, you know, lots of support and input here. This is really, really important. And so let's, you know, do our best.
And so what is the ask specifically? Because I'd like to volunteer as well, but I want to know, is it commenting on the direction? You know, what's the scope of the ask?
So I feel that the ask is to be, you know, a participant in shaping this this plan document. So I don't believe the intention is to do any technical work at this time, but rather to help the AMP team kind of create a roadmap that's going to be acceptable, you know, for the foundation for this work. And you know that's something we made pretty clear in our evaluation. So we should be really active participants with the team.
Agreed. Well, yeah, I would encourage folks to be a part of that conversation. Please add me to the list. And Toby, let us know if there's anything else that you would expect of a group like this. Great. So if anyone else is interested, please speak up now or send a message to Jory or Toby or Brian. And are we, should we have a Slack channel in the OpenJSF Slack org as well that we can converse, or what's the thought about that?
I think that would be great. We just paused, you know, the plan for like, you know, creating any of these communication channels just to wait to see who would want to participate and how. So if Slack is something that folks are going to be using and into, then we can very easily do that.
Yeah, I find Slack to be helpful there, although I know that the documentation of the conversation is less adequate there. All right, well, sorry, was somebody going to say something? May I suggest someone creating a Slack channel and maybe pinging the general channel with the request to raise their hand for the conversation and to join the Slack channel, and we can kind of move forward from there?
Sure, I can create the Slack channel.
That'd be great. Thank you. Cool. Next is the checklist deadline for Collab Summit graduation. Toby created this 3 weeks ago. The goal was for AMP to graduate by the OpenJS Collaborator Summit. The CPC will need to have time to look at the work done and actually vote on allowing AMP to do so. We need to clarify when that will be. That's a good question, especially as the Collab Summit is, what, like 10 days away?
As I remember last time, wasn't it that it wasn't going to happen by then after all?
Yeah, I think we communicated that that's probably unlikely to occur. At least, so I've been collaborating with some folks on the AMP working group, incubation working group, and I think the group is in agreement that it's would be nice if we could have done it, but it's at this point unlikely given the kinds of things we were waiting on.
Okay. Should we update this issue or close it, or what's how should we move forward on this?
Good question. I imagine an update would be preferable. We can perhaps set another target date for this project, and then update this issue because it's still, you know, we still want to move forward with vigor on completeness.
And just to be clear, the request here in this issue is merely the deadline and not like the checklist in any way?
No, I believe really the intention is to you know, involve everyone in the community with getting these objectives, these checklist items cleared for this project. And you know, we've been pretty clear with our incubating projects that this is something that we're here to help them accomplish. And so, you know, this is sort of I think an important thing to be keeping track of and keeping visible, because, you know, everybody can help the project on board, and everybody should be. So it's here's the project's goal to be onboarded by such and such date and time. You know, help us achieve that. You know.
Yeah, which I am in agreement with. Is there anything that we could be doing to help further this, whether, you know, regardless of what the specific deadline is? How can others help?
Well, I mean, I think we had been waiting on some things to come back from the board, and some of those pieces have, but I'd have to go take a look at this, at what's on this particular project's list. But, you know, anybody who would want to jump in and help, you know, by joining like the working group meeting or something like that, they'd be welcome.
Okay. All right, great. Cool. Well, we'll leave this agenda label here and check back in on this in 2 weeks and see where things are. I'm wondering if there's any way to surface either the conversation or the needs that a project may have. If there's any better way to kind of surface those things. And I'm thinking about Slack because that's where I spend a lot of my time, but I know that that's not always the best way. But if anybody has any ideas to, you know, make sure that the CPC is actively engaged in moving projects forward, you know, please let me know or speak up. All right.
I mean, the only thing that comes to mind is if there's an issue that says, here are the things we want help with, you know, possibly maintained by the champion. But
Yeah, and I'm thinking about like, you know, project boards or anything like that, but I know that there's probably in AMP's case, you know, a specific project, you know, tracking in their repositories. I certainly don't want to duplicate any sort of tracking, but
And it really comes down to like, is it something that people can do as a drive-by, or is it something where, you know, they're going to have to commit multiple hours ongoing for several weeks? Because those are two different kinds of things. If it's one, then just having a list of saying, hey, here's, if you got time, here's how you can help. Otherwise, it's more of like, hey, we want you to get involved in this one specifically, ramp up what's going on. And that's sort of a bigger ask, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I wonder about an issue in the onboarding repo for a project that is incubating that could be sort of a place that we can check in our meetings, and, you know, that could be a place that could be, you know, for lack of a better term, dumping ground for, you know, areas that could use help, small or large, and we can use like a particular issue as a way to check in on incubation progress. So I don't know. It's something we could think about and maybe discuss further at the Collab Summit or offline or what have you. All right. So those are the only two issues that are in project onboarding. Is there anything else that we want to discuss related to project onboarding before we move on to other items? I'm just checking. Yeah, okay. Should we move on to the OpenJS Foundation project landscape issue, or jump into the project board for post-bootstrap work? My inclination is to go to the project board just to make sure that doesn't languish. But I'm open to other suggestions. And actually, this board I think would be pretty quick to go through. So I will move in that direction unless anybody objects. The project board is project 3 in the cross-project council. I'll drop a link to it so folks can go directly if they'd like to. This has been around since the Bootstrap days. There's in progress. The first one is add admin policy docs. I actually have a PR about to be opened, but since I had computer trouble, I'm not sure which computer it's on, so I need to figure that out and submit that PR. And that is basically adding, you know, GitHub admin policy docs, which maybe I could even update to include more information on GitHub org management policy and such, based on the discussions about member owners and such. The next one on in progress is review foundation infrastructure and rethink how we manage it. You know, this has been around for a while, and I think has been kind of just sitting on, you know, how progress happens with other particular projects, jQuery, Node, and what was the other one? I was just glanced by. But do we have any thoughts? I'm looking here. The last comment is from Jory on October 22nd from project infrastructure, I think born out of the jQuery discussions. And it looks like AMP is referring to it in some of their project, in some of their GitHub issues. Yeah, do we have any thoughts about this currently, or do we expect to just continue kind of working on it bespoke until we land somewhere?
So we did approve the work in progress, what did we call that? The services, draft services menu, and had some input from folks on that. I think really in terms of next needs, it's going to kind of boil down to what the projects, what unique challenges the projects are having as they sort of upgrade their own infrastructure and identify you know, those needs and things. So I'm not really sure, without anything more concrete than that, what else we need to do here, or what further action needs to happen. There's plenty of action on the individual project level, to be sure, but right now it's not clear what exactly is shared across all of the projects.
Yeah, I mean, we've documented what the current sort of services you can get. It's is that enough, or like like you said, each of the projects has their own challenges. It may be that like once a few more bigger projects come on, those projects, once AMP's joined, maybe Node and AMP can look together to see what their infrastructures is there any commonality or whatever. But like right now, unless it seems to me to go further, somebody would have to like invest a bunch of time and say, well, what do we envision the foundation providing beyond what we've documented, right?
Right.
Yeah, I agree. I guess the question is, do we need to document this somewhere, either in a repo or on the website, and then call this done, and until we, something is born out of the work that other projects are doing, that we can further this, or how do we feel like this is closed?
It's almost like we could use an aspirational, like here's a bunch of things we still think could use some future, some more work or improvement in the foundation CPC, but we're not really actively working right now, so we don't forget them. But having an issue where we don't do anything doesn't make a lot of sense in my mind, right?
Right.
So if we had a list like that, we could move it back onto that list as like, hey, we've taken the first step, but next steps would be to see if there's anything bigger or better we can do. But it's on the sort of on the back burner until somebody says, hey, that's what I'm going to try and champion.
Well, so one of the bullet points for the agenda for the Collab Summit is infrastructure. I mean, we can, chat about it then and see if there's anything, blue sky that we think we should be thinking about, and see if an issue is born out of that.
Yep. I can see it comes back to like, the ComCom and TSC and Node, we ended up with like strategic initiatives. And those always depended on somebody having stepped up as the champion to say, I'm going to help push this forward.
Yeah, and I think here what's missing is, somebody with a passion and a vision for it, to decide to do that, so +1.
So kind of having that list of, hey, here are the things that we'd love to have champions for because we know we should do them. So we don't totally forget things, but then, yeah, moving it into that kind of list until we do get a champion. Sounds like people agree makes sense.
Mm-hmm. All right. So let me just ask Jory, where, or anyone, where will this infrastructure services menu land?
Well, I think it already landed, and I think it's just a file on the CPC repo.
Yep. Yeah, I landed it, I think, earlier this week, and it's under the main CPC repo as infrastructure_menu.
Oh, there it is. All right, great. So do we feel like we can close this then, or and then see how things are borne out?
I think so.
Okay. Okay, I will comment and close. Great. So there is a column here in the post-bootstrap housekeeping that is waiting on board/foundation. Do we have any updates on any of these? It's project-directed funding, update move JSF CLA bot for new foundation, and define and document a style guide for foundation's name. I feel like that last one, Brian made some progress on.
Yeah, you can close that now that we have the art repo up.
Hello, Brian.
Hello. I snuck in.
Great.
So is the style guide is part of that, right? That repo? Okay.
Yep.
All right, so I'm just putting in a note that we now have an artwork repo with style guide and guidance. And I will close the comment. Great. Working backwards, update and move JSF CLA bot. I know that there's been some discussion about CLAs. Do we have any progress there?
Yeah, I think we're ready to turn this on. The CLAs have all been approved as of the last board meeting. Basically, any project that would like to implement a CLA, which, per the IP policy is optional, any project who would like to implement a CLA can reach out to me, and we will start the process of getting things configured for their GitHub repos.
Great.
Message format is interested in that.
Great. So we will run it through the process here. So I'll get in touch with you, and we'll get things kicked off here.
Cool.
Ryan, since we kind of sort of started the process with architect, do you have some time sometime soon? Maybe we can get that knocked out, and then hopefully it'll be easier for the others.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, just let me know. I mean, I've got a little bit of time today, got a lot of time tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll ping you here on Slack, Chris.
Okay.
Get that finished off, and then we'll get Emily going.
And Brian, if you wouldn't mind just maybe dropping a comment on this issue and then closing it, that would be awesome.
Yeah, let me find that.
It is issue 124 in the CPC. I can drop it in the chat for convenience.
Yes, there it is. Thank you.
You're welcome. And then the final one on this column is project-directed funding. I always hesitate to even mention this issue, but
yeah,
I
will just say, I will just say that discussions on this are active and ongoing. It's a complicated topic. It remains a complicated topic.
Do we have any like timeline or anything that we're aiming for in terms of kind of having something born out of this?
As soon as possible, but with the understanding that it's not one person or two people to drive it forward. There are a number of things that need to be considered. But I mean, the hour prior to this one, we were actually meeting on this. It'll be a topic of discussion next week when the board meets. It's actively being worked on, but I would hesitate to commit to a specific timeline because
of course,
we keep uncovering complexities and things that we really want to make sure are very clear, so that we don't create more confusion in trying to add clarity.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense, and I appreciate hearing that it is an ongoing topic of discussion. And I'm just making a note here so that it's kind of reflected in the issue. Very active and ongoing topic of discussion at the board. Cool. Wow, 12:59. How do you like that? So we haven't touched on the OpenJS Foundation project landscape, but again, I encourage folks to drop comments into issue 411, and we can look at discussing that further. I believe that we decided, that we decided to create an issue to discuss the CPC meetings for December. The expectation is that next week will be canceled, and potentially the meeting on the 24th and 31st will also be canceled. So we should create an issue to discuss that. Perhaps you know, some schedule move would be helpful to keep you know, progress in our work. Does anybody have anything else before we call it a wrap?
Just to say, I think definitively, it sounds like we did agree to cancel, or we did prudent to cancel the standards meeting that was scheduled and at 2. And then if you're free for the next half hour, join us on the Collab Summit planning meeting. Yay!
Yeah, do we have guidance on how people can join that meeting?
I'll just pop a link to the Zoom in Slack.
Great. All right, cool. Well, thanks everyone. I look forward to seeing some of you, all of you, at Node.js Interactive. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.